Thank you very much. 78,000 consultations, give or take. That's how many students I spoke with over the last 20 years or so as a university GP. And today I want to tell you a little bit about their stories, about what I heard. And I want to share with you some of the things that I picked up, some of the trends over that time. Because it feels so important to think about why we're seeing this significant increase in distress in young people, and we are seeing that. Thank you. Over that time, I noticed about 20 years ago that I might see 1 or 2 people a day for a mental health problem. And that was out of about 30 patients a day. When I left clinical practice last September, it was 50%. 1 in 2 of the young people coming to see a university GP in my practice, but also around the UK, was for a mental health problem. And actually, on some days, because I am a GP with a special interest in mental health, I would see 9 out of 10 of my young patients for mental health issues. So I started to ask myself, what's going on? And is there anything that we can do to change this? And so I'm going to tell you a little bit about what I've found out. And then at the end, I'm going to ask you to do 2 things, if you can, to help the next generation. What I noticed with this massive increase in distress was also a significant increase in the pressure that they feel. Now, we've always been under pressure. Who isn't under pressure? But what I've noticed and what they talked about was the competitive society that we live in. We have become an overly competitive society. So we've always had competition around things like sport, general knowledge quizzes, a bit of singing and dancing and the performing arts. But now we're competitive about cooking, about sewing, choir singing, ice skating. Even cake has become competitive. Actually, even falling in love on an island. We have to think about that and what message that is giving to the young people growing up in that culture. Because the message is really clear. You have to win. Because if you're not a winner, you're a loser. Off you go. And that is a really strong message to give to young people. And what we're seeing is that actually it's obviously not just in the social things that we've seen this competitiveness. It's also happening clearly at university. 50% of young people now go on to higher education, which is great on the one hand, but on the other, of course, it means that 50% of young people have a degree. There are that many more graduates that you're up against. So when you're going into the workplace looking for a job, you need to stand out. How are you going to stand out? So the pressure is on. You have to do a master's. And then it's a PhD. And your degree, your undergraduate degree, you can't just get a degree anymore and go to university for an education. That's not good enough. You need to get a first. 1 in 4 graduates now get a first. So how do you stand out? They tell me that they don't join clubs just for the fun of it anymore in Freshers Week. They don't, join the chocolate eating club or the frisbee club, because if it's not for their CV, they're not interested. There are first-year undergrads coming in their first term at university, worried that they're not on track for a first. So there has been a massive shift in what we're seeing. Well, you might say, bit of competition, that's good, gives them something to aim for. Doesn't that bring out the best in people? Well, it doesn't. What happens is it drives perfectionism. And I'm not talking about the kind of perfectionism where you're quite tidy, or you like things sorted out just so. This is the sort of perfectionism that massively undermines them. They torment themselves with how they are failing. They're the student who gets 10 A stars but focuses on the 1 A with no star and berates themselves, torments themselves about that, tells themselves that they're a failure. We know young people like that, and that is happening more and more. That is why it matters, because perfectionism is linked to a lot of mental health conditions. It is a trait as part of anxiety, obsessive-compulsive disorder, eating disorders, depression, self-harm. They are all closely associated with perfectionism. So we have to think, if competitiveness is part of what's driving perfectionism, and that is woven through mental health conditions, we need to tackle this competitive society to move forward. Because fear of failure is stopping them achieving their potential. They have such a crippling fear of failure that they won't try stuff. They won't do stuff just for fun, just in case. They won't do it just for the skills or the learning. They are really frightened of letting their families down, letting people down. That is what really worries them. So actually, we need to think about the messages that are coming across. Hang on, though. You'll all be thinking, social media is to blame, isn't it? That's what the media would have us know, that social media is the problem and causing all these mental health problems. It's linked, of course, to things like bullying, to harassment. Of course, it's part of that picture. But what it does for competitiveness and perfectionism, it acts like a huge lens magnifying those worries. So they are now judged 24/7, rated, graded on everything that they do. That is an enormous pressure on young people, and there's no escape. They can't get away from that. So we have to remember that social media does play a part, but I don't think, and the studies don't show, that it is the key issue here. So here's where I ask you to think about two things if we're going to tear down this tyranny of perfection and face the fear of failure head on. Because otherwise, the next 78,000 students coming to see their GP are not going to be any better off than we are now. We need to do something to change the culture that we're living in that says it's all about competition and being the winner, not the loser. There are two practical things that I'm going to ask you to think about doing. First of all, normalize failure. Okay? When you don't get that promotion, when you don't get that job, when you lose at a sporting event, tell the young people that you know, your children, your pupils at school, tell them at university students. Share the fact that it's okay not to be perfect. That, you know what? Not winning is part of life. And normalize that experience for them, and that you're okay with it. Okay? That life goes on. That it's not a catastrophe when things aren't working out as expected. So share your failures. And the other big ask is think about the question, does this have to be competitive the next time you're organizing a university event, a kids' party, a village fair? You know, do we need this much competition in our lives? Or can this one just be for fun, to learn a new skill and take that pressure off them? So I'm saying no more medals, not for everyone, not for anyone, for certain events where it can be, let's say, no more competition, so that the message is very clear. Not winning is part of life, and that's okay. We can learn from that. And secondly, you guys, the young people, you just have to do your best, not be the best. Thank you.